I am Suzanne Lane. I am the director of Family Star, and today we are going to be So, with that being said, the first topic on our agenda is a Family Star overview. I want to give you a little bit of information about Family Network on Disabilities because Family Star is under a larger umbrella, which is under Family Network on Disabilities. So it's a Family Network on Disabilities is a nationwide network of individuals of all ages that may be at risk, that have disabilities, or have special needs in their families and professionals or concerned citizens. So it was founded in 1985, which was approximately 30 years ago. It was a grassroots organization of families that just wanted to get mutual support from each other and share information to support their families with disabilities. What really makes F&D unique is that half of the board of directors and all of the program staff are either parents that have children with disabilities or family members that have disabilities. So I'm trying to navigate this and figure it all out, right? So learn with me here. So our mission at F&D is to strive for that complete integration of equality for persons with disabilities within that society without barriers, and to serve families with disabilities from birth to age 26 who have a full range of disabilities. So a little bit about Family Star is that Family Star is Florida's family-to-family health information center. We are federally funded with HRSA, which is the Health Resources Service Administration. And we are under a nationwide organization called Family Voices. So we here in Florida are a part of the Family Voices Network. We do not, one of the things that we need to know about Family Network on Disabilities and Family Star is that I'm not an attorney, I'm not a healthcare professional, I am a mom. What we do is we provide support, information, and we provide options. Now, when I say we provide options, it's not our job. Sometimes when I'm talking or even when I'm presenting, it may sound like I'm telling you what to do, and that's not the case. Absolutely not the case. What the goal is to provide you options that you may actually know some of those options already, and you may not know the options, but it's providing you with those options so that you make that choice that's truly best for your family. So part of F&D is the PTIs, Parent Training Information Centers, and they are federally funded under the Office of Special Education, and they provide supports for families, and we have several grants that work throughout the state. And again, we have been around for over 30 years, starting out as that grassroots organization. So we have a group that's at the top of the state of Florida, which is Poppin' Parents of the Panhandle Information Network. And they range from Pensacola all the way back over to Jacksonville, so on the other coast, from east to west. I do that backwards, right? East to west is this way. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at myself on this. So you have that support up there in the top of the state. Now for the center of the state of Florida, we have Parent Support Network. The acronym would be PSN, and they are located through the center of the state from the Treasure Coast, the East Coast, all the way over to the Sun Coast, over in Dunedin, the Tampa area. We also have PSN, PEN, which is the Parent Educating Network, which is located in the most southern regions of the state. So wherever you go, you have that support through the state to provide support for our families. Every state has a PTI. Fortunately for us here in Florida, we have our 3 PTIs. Another great thing about F&D, we have the youth advocates that work with our young people and reach direct with them, providing those information that they need that's relevant to them. And so I'm having some difficulty here with my computer, so I hope that you're not having that difficulty. So wherever you go, if you look at our website, which I will be posting later on to our Facebook, onto the Facebook link with this, is www.fndusa.org, and you can get a lot of information and resources on our website. We have the F&D University that you can watch presentations that we have done, which is very useful. And then you do that at your own pace, at your own time. Just like on this YouTube video, you'll have that opportunity to watch at any time that you would like to watch. And those resources. So if you were to call upon me and ask for some assistance, and I could not give you that answer, I would definitely be able to find that, because we have that large database resource, and we also have information from other families that we share. We'll find that answer for you. So we provide workshops, conferences, and webinars. Our webinars are done through, a lot of those are done through Facebook Live. Our workshops, you can find those anywhere that you're needing a workshop. We are willing to travel. We have the staff throughout the state. Our workshops are done in English or in Spanish throughout the state. This information is available to you. So with that being said, that's a little bit of information, and we always use best practice and evidence-based practices. So when we provide that information, we want families to be well informed of their rights, and also to understand how to navigate the systems, because a lot of systems can be very difficult to navigate and get that information that we want. So our next topic for today is going to be welcome to the ED exception, which is the exceptional student education. And it's important to know that, when our child, and I know that when I started out as a parent, it was very, very difficult, and I wish that I'd had this training right from the start. It would have been very, very informative and helpful for me. So when our child enters regular education for the first time, it's usually with that, we're really happy and the rite of passage for that beginning. And our role as a parent is we have to be supportive and take some interest in our child's activities, what's going on with the school. And it varies. So our role with a child with a disability is very different than a lot of other families, because the role is expanded and it's critical for the success of our the outcome of our child. So no one ever hopes that their child is going to be, selected for special education. And if a parent knows and understands the needs of our child, then there's help. So as children get that information, our parents get that information, then our children can be more successful there. So the best outcomes for our children really occur when the families and the schools work together. We can make things happen. And there's several things that have to be considered when we're looking at special education for a child. We have to look at their learning differentiality. We have to see if our child has behavioral issues. If they're having problem doing homework or finishing homework, that they're slow, are they consistently breaking rules? Are they having problems with hearing or seeing? Or are they talking differently? Or was this identified at birth? For some folks, that we know this at the beginning when our child is born, that our child's going to have some difficulties. So when we start this, we look at Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 in the Civil Rights. It says, and I'm going to read this, it says that it prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability and applies to any agency receiving federal funding. And our schools are receiving federal funding, so any agency. So there's different laws. We have the federal law, which is the IDEA law, and the Section 504 Rehabilitation Act, and the ADA, the American Disabilities Act. Disability world just loves acronyms, so I'm going to try to remember to change the acronym for you so that you know what it is, because it's important that you know what those acronyms are, because when I first started, I was totally lost with this. And then we have state law, and in Florida we have the Florida Sunshine Statutes and State Board of Education Rights. And then we also have, at a district level, we have special programs and procedures, and that 504 procedures. So with IDEA, we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's an affirmative action law. It is categorically, it's funded through the U.S. Department of Education, and that is where our procedural safeguards come from. We want to make sure that we have those procedural safeguards in place for us to keep our children safe and educated. Those are our rights. So we have it's a blueprint. So let's talk about if we think that our child, because my children did not start with special education, they started that process while they were in school. So the question comes down to who can make those referrals. So we have our children, and we're thinking that maybe they're needing special education. So as parents, we can make a referral. Teachers can make referrals. The doctors can make referrals or suggest that, we need to consider special education. The social worker that we're working with, the therapist, even a student can ask. And then a child study team. In the state of Florida, we have this child study teams. So we need to know that in that notification for education, it needs to include reasons for the evaluation, what type of testing to be used, and then who will test. And all research data supports that the best student outcomes occur when families and schools work together collaboratively. We need to involve parents in their children's formal education. It shows that it improves student achievement. And it's that most effective when it's comprehensive, long-lasting, and well-planned. That's where it looks different for us. We have to plan this out and work very diligently on this. So these benefits, they not only are not limited to that early childhood and elementary school ages. It continues on. The strong effects of parental involvement are evident throughout high school when parents are involved in the education process. So to ensure the quality of education, and parents need to be involved at all levels. And family involvement is the result can be in better education outcomes. We can't achieve these outcomes if we look at the schools and homes separate, as in isolation. So families can be best involved with their children's education if they understand their children's needs, the dynamics of the school system and their children's rights, and know that the people who provide those hands-on interventions or direct support for our children. It's very critical. Parents and schools have to work together. And when we're looking at that and when we're working together, it becomes a multi-member team. And it needs to be culturally fair. It provides, and if we have a primary language, it has to be in that primary language of the parent. And it needs to select tests that are relevant to our child, and it demonstrates their abilities. So we need to know that our children learn differently from other children. Are they not active, or they're active enough? Do they break rules, have problems with hearing? And was it identified at birth? So we want to make sure in Florida that the students requiring special education and accommodations, they are called exceptional students. This education program is called the Exceptional Student Education. So very important, when we're going into this, we need to know that we have to have parental consent when we're looking at our child going into special education. Remember, I said it's a team approach. So we have to work together, and the parents have to consent for the initial evaluations. So earlier I mentioned that IDEA was an affirmative action plan. It states that states are provided funding to ensure the opportunity of children with disabilities and their right to a free and appropriate public education. And there's that another acronym. It's called FAPE, F-A-P-E, FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education. The states have to guarantee that certain procedural safeguards are followed, and that are followed in order for our children to qualify and retain that funding. So in order for a student to receive the services under IDEA, they have to be tested, and our children, not every child meets those criteria. So we have, after those testing and all this evaluation, then the team determines the eligibility piece for in the categories, because there are 13 categories in which our children can be identified in the state of Florida. So there are certain procedural safeguards and it's really, really important that we understand those rights, because those are our rights. That's that booklet that they may give you at the beginning of a meeting, and it tells us what the rules are and how to proceed if we have a problem, or if we want to know who's involved. So let's talk about that educational cycle. We have several steps that we talk about. First, we talked about the referral and who it is that can refer. And we know that the people that can refer is anyone that has knowledge of our child and their abilities and disabilities or struggles, so what they need. And then we have the evaluation process, which our children, we first sign for that consent piece for this part of the evaluation. And we do assessments that show where our children are performing and where they are struggling. And then we have the eligibility piece, where we come back together and meet as a team and go over and see where our child fits under those 13 categories. Then we have, as we sit down with this team and we discuss that eligibility, if our child is determined that yes, their disability impedes upon their ability educationally, then we're going to write that plan, and we're going to sit down and talk about what that plan looks like. where it is our child needs assessments, where our child needs help. Do we need more testing for more information? That can happen at that point as well. So we write out that plan, and then we have to sign consents. And when we sign those consents and say, yes, we agree that our child will be placed in special education, in the special education program, then we also talk about the placement, where our child goes. What does that look like? So then we go to, we start this process. Our child is not in special education until we sign, everything is signed, we've had these 6 steps, and then that's where we start. So there are a lot of rules and laws about how special education is provided to our students. The laws that parents should be a part of, and the process that decides what's best for our children. Children with exceptional needs have the right to, that word FAPE that I was using earlier, free, appropriate public education. Every child that is identified as having a disability is under the age of 22 and that has not graduated are entitled to receive those services. Each child is different. My child may have an IEP and even the same diagnosis as your child, but it's going to look totally different because my child is unique, just like your child is unique. So we're going to start with that first step and talk a little bit more about that referral piece. So everyone on the child study team, the parent, the teachers, the doctors, the social workers, they may independently refer our child, but then the parent can tell the school if there's a problem that exists or what's expected and request that evaluation. And it has to be requested in writing. It's very important to know that when we're talking about special education, that everything is in writing. We have to put everything in writing, whether that's in writing through email or through letters and certified letters to make sure that we know that they've received these. So then that teacher, we can also have the teacher can fill out the referral. We can do a well screening test or screening. Now, it's not a test because every student can have that done. So a doctor or social worker or therapist may contact the school about the child's needs, or older children can even request their own evaluation. So that's why we may need that child study team. They may determine that the child's needs are great and we need help to start that process. So the IEP, it is the individual education plan. It is a written statement for a child with a disability. It's developed, it's reviewed, and in a meeting, the parents are included. We are an equal team. Notice when I say the word team. So we do this all together. So we have parents, school staff, all of this is put together so that to develop a plan and objectives with the appropriate supports and adaptations or modifications to meet the unique needs of our child. So who are the minimum team members we need to have in our room when we're having this meeting? Because sometimes there can be a lot of people and other times there's not as many. So it's important to know as a parent, we are first and foremost, we are the ones. We need a regular ed teacher. We need a special ed teacher. We need somebody from the district, a school representative who is responsible to commit those funds for our child. And they are called the LEA, which is the lead educational advisor. So we can have other people attend these meetings. Some other people that we may want to have in those meetings can include our child, and our child should always be included by age 14. They can start prior to that if it is something that you think would be beneficial for your child, but only you know your child best. So the other people that can be invited would be the guidance counselor. If they have relevant information that would help drive this IEP, and they know your child. You may want to have the therapist there. You can have a previous teacher. You can have a service provider, so a therapist, a speech person that's been working with your child. Anyone that you choose as a family member, anyone that you choose can be there to help provide those services. So this IEP document has information on it that is very, very relevant to your children and so to your child. And when you look at that, one of the first things you see on there is the present level of performance. You're going to see their evaluation criteria. You're going to see their program, their ESE, their Exceptional Student Education Program of eligibility. Also, you will see their goals on there, the goals that they're going to get for the year, and those objectives and benchmarks, so the smaller goals that are leading in there. These are always time sensitive. They have a time and duration. So it's very important that those are there. And then we have a statement of the LER, which is the least restrictive environment. So where our child is going to be. We also have related services. Accommodations, what accommodations is my child going to have, and those modifications, and what is it going to look like for my child with participation with testing. So we have, for this document, we have a beginning date when we sign off. When, remember I said we sign off on this, and then the program starts. So we have the start of the program, and we have a yearly evaluation when we go back and look and see where, so we will have an end date of 1 year from when we originally meet, and then we can meet at any time. So let's talk about that evaluation process just a little bit. We have, after that next step after the referral, we need to determine and decide what tests and information will be required to determine our child's strengths, weaknesses, interests. This information is used to determine if the student is eligible for ESE services. And under the state guidance. So the services are determined by the Sunshine State standards. This way we have that piece. So they have to then take notes. They're going to be using classroom observations. They're going to be reviewing their school files. If our child is in the 2nd or 3rd grade when we decide that we're going through this evaluation process, what does it look like? Let's look back on this child's files, and then we want to be talking. They're going to be talking with the teacher and the therapist, and we're going to be wanting to fill out a positive student profile, and identifying those people that will be in the meeting. When we have that plan, we're starting to do this plan and putting it all together. We're going to be talking about our hopes and our dreams for our child. You're going to want to ask questions. Always take notes, write questions down. Don't agree to something you don't understand. This is where asking questions is very important. It is overwhelming. There is a lot there, but ask questions. And if you disagree, kind of write down where you're disagreeing so that you're able to refer back to it, and then go on to what you agree, so that this way you can return to it later, so that this way you're actually taking an active role in that education plan. So what next, right? We're done. We did this. We had this meeting. We are agreeing. We have everything put together. And we know that this is a great plan we've made with the school for us. What does it look like? We want to celebrate them, right? Because we want our child to know that they are going to get support where they need. We're going to, maybe we want to visit the classroom. We want to confirm that our child understands. We want to talk to our child about it. We really want to get a good understanding and have our child understand what's going to happen next. So that parental role is really important in all the steps that are required to obtain the appropriate services for our child. They fall into, the steps are very easy. We go through them one by one. It helps us understand a little bit better what's going on. So we have that referral step is the first one. Then we have the evaluation piece. And then we talked about determine eligibility and developing the plan and consent and placement. So those are our steps that we have. And then, of course, always like to add one more step, that we celebrate that we're going to get the help that we need. So what do we do if we're disagreeing with something? That's really important to know. What does it look like when we disagree? We want to put it in writing, okay? Let's say that we disagree with some of the testing that's done. We don't think it's reflective of what's going on. We let the school know. We ask them if what else can we do? We first work with them, try to figure out what else can we do. But if it's denied, they feel it's very reflective of our child. So then we can ask for what's called an IEE, an independent evaluation process at the school's expense. But in order to start that process, we must put it in writing. It needs to be put in writing. So if we're not found, and so that process starts when we ask for that, and then we work with the school again to get that process going, and they may have a list of people that help them do those independent evaluation process, and you agree to who you're going to use for this process. So what happens if our child's not eligible for ESE accommodations? And this has even happened to me. It's what do we do? So then we're going to be looking at that 504 plan and look for the accommodations and request request a new evaluation, just depending on what you feel. What's important to understand about that 504, the identification of a disability is that it affects one major life activity. So that's one that's affected, one major life activity. And then there's a record of the disability. So I've been seeing the doctor for 5 years, for this. There's a record of this. I have that record. And then, is it really regarded as a disability? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that 504. So how do we do this? What does that look like? We've been denied. So we're going to develop from this. We've got a lot of information. We went through this evaluation process. We've got all this information. And our child may not need, as many, we don't need modifications. We just need accommodations. So in this meeting, we want to look at providing that assistive technology or related services. What is it that's needed? There are optional people that can attend the meetings. Again, we go back to the students, the guidance counselors. We have a lot of people that can help us out. So if we don't agree with what has happened, we have those procedural safeguards. Remember, I talked about those a little bit earlier. We have those that we can go back on and look there so that we've done the steps that are required to see if our child is eligible for special education services. Remember that the Americans Disability Act, the ADA, is a Section 504 with the bite. What do I mean by that? Once it's written, once that IEP is signed, it can only be changed if both parties agree to due process. So it's important as parents that we learn about rules, learn the rules. So parents receive notice of meetings, we get the time, the date, and people that will be attending that meeting. And we need to let the school know if we're going to be bringing guests with us to talk about our child, someone that knows our child well. And then we need to participate, and we need to sign that. They'll send us that notification. We need to sign it and return it. So, ask to see and read school records. Take a look at the school records. Talk to people who are involved with your child to know more how your child's interacting at school. Follow through with the program, with the information that the school is sending to you. And pay attention closely to the details, because sometimes it's easy to overlook the details, and we don't want to be doing that part. We're going to transition into our next progress, which is the Individualized Emergency Health and Emergency Plan. Within that 504 piece. So our child's eligible for 504 accommodations. And I do want to talk about the individual health plan. If you can have an IEP and a 504, but our child may need an individual health plan. And with that, it's a formal written agreement developed with that interdisciplinary, so it's a team effect. It may be some of the same people that sit on that IEP team or the 504 team. It's a collaboration with all of them, with our family, with the student, and with the student's healthcare providers. So when we're looking at this, we need to understand that IDEA is the educational benefit piece. It's children who qualify under at least one of the 13 categories of IDEA. And that 504 is children who meet determination for eligibility, which is includes and it can include those that may be eligible under IDEA. And when we talk about that ADA piece, that is guaranteeing that equal access, regardless of the funding and regardless of the age that follows us into adulthood. So when we're looking at what is that individual health plan, so we know that if our child has special health care needs and has medical documentation and it impedes upon their access to education, what is it that that is in an individualized health plan? It contains information. It entails guidelines and standards that promotes our child's health and educational goals. But what is that? It avoids unnecessary risk, restrictions, stigma, or when we're looking at this, we want to look at some of those health-related needs that we might need in there. So what if our child has serious allergies, medical needs? They may have chronic conditions, physical disabilities. They may need catheterization, toileting assistance. These are the things that would be on a healthcare plan. So we need to look at that in order to make that plan work for our child. So how do we determine whether we need this healthcare plan? Who does this? We want to be talking with a school nurse, a parent, the students involved, and we may have medical professionals outside that will be working with our children. So it's also very good for emergency situations. It is going to outline what we're going to do in case of an emergency situation. Other things that where we may need these plans for would be peanut allergies, asthma, epilepsy. What if we have insulin and we're dependent upon this? And then we also have mental illness or meltdowns. So where, you know, that emergency plan really needs to describe many things. It needs to, who's going to be involved, what we are doing, why we are doing this, how we are doing this. So if we're giving our children medication, catheterization, how is this going to be done? And where are we going to be doing this? So we need to use the same process to develop the emergency, the individualized healthcare plan. So it's an acronym. So it's IHP. So we have three components. It needs to be comprehensive, it has to be coordinated, and it has to be communicated. If the student has an IEP or a 504, we need to make sure that this stays attached to that document. We use the same process to get this. It's very important that we are involved and that we share information. It's not required, but we are the CEOs of our families. We understand our children best. We need to be able to share that information so that our child can be successful in school. So in part, if you have other questions, I would be glad to help with that piece for that individualized healthcare plan. We're going to now transition into ADHD, ADD. What exactly is ADHD? How does it affect one's life? We're going to talk about what are some of those symptoms, and we're going to talk about how we can help, and because we want to be able to help our children. It's very important. So ADD, it's called Attention Deficit Disorder. We throw that acronym out a lot. So we have ADHD, which we hear a lot about, and that is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So everyone knows a child who is inattentive, not paying attention. We know what that looks like in our child. We may have a child that's hyperactive, very, very impulsive. We look at that piece, how that affects, and then we have those children that falls into that social emotional challenges. And that's when we have a child who not only fails to give close attention to detail or makes careless mistakes in homework, but they have difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play. And they don't want to listen when they're being spoke to directly. And they don't follow through on instructions or fail to finish school homework assignments, chores, or duties in the workplace. Even difficulty organizing tasks and activities. They often will avoid situations that they dislike, or they may, or anything that has to sustain their attention for long periods of times. When we look at that as schoolwork, they often lose their toys, their assignments, their pencils, their books, tools, tasks, or even easily get distracted. They forget daily activities. So we have that inability of finishing work in the workplace can also affect. It's not laziness. It comes down to having a short attention span and the impatience, which is very common in children with ADHD. Very, very common. And your brain, it's kind of like a Ferrari. Okay, it may be revving. We may have a student that's brain is just going, and it needs to be kept busy. So if we have someone that has ADHD, there's a lot of advantages to this. There's a lot of people that have ADHD. We have people such as Lisa Ling has ADHD. Very successful people have ADHD. Tim Howard, Will I Am, Michael Phelps. We have Sir Richard Branson has ADHD. So we have a lot of people that are very successful and have ADHD. And so we know that if we keep ourselves busy, for some folks, it's that car motion. We're going, keeping them busy. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Where do we start if we have a child like that in our house that we have to keep constantly busy and keep their focus, attention? Where do we start? We want to talk about the research. We're going to talk about teacher guidance we have. We can have a meeting at school. In the state of Florida that we have MTSS and RTI interventions. And then we also have medical consultants that help us along the way. So we first start at home and we're looking at what we can do at home, right? Because that's where we're probably noticing it most. And we may be hearing from teachers and they're wanting to discuss and talk about what it is that's going on at home. And we're like, well, we see this at home, and they have these strategies that they may be able to help us with. So we'll have the meeting with the teacher and we'll talk about what's going on and see if some of the strategies that they're using at school, you can use at home. Maybe your situation is that everything's fine at home. We're structured. We've got everything going. And our child is having difficulties at school. Then it would be helpful as a parent if I were to share that information with the school so that they know what I'm doing at home and can those strategies be transferred to the school environment. At school, we have that MTSS and RTI framework. What's really nice about this is that RTI is a nationwide movement, but it looks different in every state. So even though today I'm talking about Florida, in other states, the RTI process looks different. It may have different components to it, but it's basically 3 tiers and everybody is involved in the RTI process. Even our children with special education, every student. This is not something that we have to sign off on, but that we may get notes sent home that tell us where our child is and suggestions for interventions. And this is also somewhere where we can talk to the school and ask about this framework. It has 3 tiers. Every student is on the bottom tier, tier 1. Everyone gets accommodations and they work, and it's evidence-based strategies that they're working with their students. So they look at these and they provide these for our students. Everyone's involved. Now, if my child is struggling or having difficulty, then we go up to the next tier, tier 2. That may be, let's say, 25% of the students may need some other accommodation. So they use these evidence-based strategies and then implement those with our students and see if they're effective. So for those students that are doing well with this, they may need those strategies for a while or a longer period, and they may stay there for a little while in tier 2, or they may move back down to tier 3. It just depends on what strategies are used, and we give those supports for all students. So now if our child is on tier, I did this backwards, so I do apologize. Forgive me. Everyone is on tier 1. And then if a student needs some more supports, they may be on tier 2. And then there's a lesser amount of students, let's say 25% of students. And then we have tier 1, which is the smaller piece of that triangle. And they will be lesser students in this triangle getting those supports there. And to understand that that framework looks so different from each state, if our students is in these tiers, we can actually ask for information, ask where our child is on the RTI data, and they have strategies, and we can look at what strategies are being used in school and if they're successful, and then we can use those strategies as well at home. So I do apologize about that. So in that is part of the framework in those strategies that we use when we're looking for special education as well. Because if the strategies did not work, we need to know that. So if my child is still struggling at home and at school, I can communicate with my doctor and tell them what is going on. And so we need to communicate that piece with our doctor. It's important to reach out for that support because they can really provide supports for us when things we feel as if they're unraveling in our home. And then we can make changes at home and make changes at school in order for our children to be more successful and make things more satisfying for us at home and at school. ADHD and ADD is long-term. It is not something that can be quick fix. It is something that we have to make every effort and strategies to put together in order to support our children. And sometimes it can be very, very difficult, but we need to make every effort to manage the symptoms and to direct our child's energy in that constructive and with positive outlets and the educational paths. Put it all together. So we need to, when we go to talk to our doctor, we may need to make an appointment with them, talk with them, and find out what strategies. We may request an evaluation at that point for our child, or we may have already had one, and then we can share that with the school as well. But oftentimes, they will give us information about our child that would really benefit us in order to support our child. Then we have, in the classroom, we have universal design for learning. And that's another acronym, is that UDL. And they have different classroom strategies that reach all children within the classroom, because we all are unique. And in those evaluations that we do with the doctor, we may learn our child's learning style and preferences so that we can then help them be a better student and be more successful. So it's really important that we, with our child, that we clarify our expectations and that we have very clear and consistent rules and make sure that they're understood by our child, and state that behavior that you expect not to see, and let them know what you expect to see, and then and address the things that they're doing good and not look at that negative behavior. So look at having daily routines on a regular basis with our child. And it's very important, that consistency. It's vital to knowing what's going on and helping them understand what's going on. It really makes it less chaotic. It makes it more predictable for our child. And our doctors will provide us with accommodations or tell us about accommodations that would be useful for our child in the classroom and at home. And that's where we have those conversations with the school. The schools have lists of accommodations that they use with children with ADHD and ADD. And these are evidence-based strategies that they use. And so we need to share that information. And when things are working well at home, when we have a child with ADD or ADHD, we need to share that with the schools. It's always one of those useful pieces. There is a lot of assistive technologies these days, computer software, brain games that we can play, that our children can play. We have talking voice computers that record the voices so that our children can hear what's going on, to understand things. We can have, if they're having problems with hearing so much around them that it gets them distracted, then we can have noise canceling earphones. There is so many listed that it's really hard to talk about or to list them straight out. But we also need to know that when we're looking at a child, it's kind of like an iceberg, or looking at a person, or it's like an iceberg. We can only see so much. And we have to really want to raise that emotional intelligence that we see on the top. and balancing that awareness and that performance, because underneath it, we have that self-awareness that we want to encourage, the motivation. We have self-management skills that we need to work on, and social skills, and that empathy piece. I want to talk about top 10 tips that are very useful. And we need to really, with our children, we want to schedule that one-on-one time with them. It helps give that enforcer. It's very important to build a regular time with our child, listening and enjoying them and relaxing together. So we need that time, and we need to schedule it sometimes, because I don't know about you, but I'm running all over the place. So I need to really schedule time with my child. And so this one tip here is so very helpful for me, to schedule that time with my child so that I can relax and have a special time and learn about my child and how they think and how they think. And I know sometimes when we have more than one child, it can be very difficult. So we can, our children really, we get to know them. But not only that, but if our child, and I can use my children as an example, is that they're everywhere. And so how do we spend time and have positive interactions with them at a good time? So we want to stay strong for our children and help them be strong. It's a very important thing. Another thing is nutrition and sleep is very important. We need to look at that, how our children are doing. And I know that I love my coffee in the morning, and we model things, and I need that coffee to get going. And then if my children are drinking coffee or sodas before going to school, is that affecting them? Is it hyping them up more? We need to look at this. We need to eat balanced meals and get plenty of sleep. And if there's difficulty with sleeping, we really need to let our doctors know that as well, so that we can, again, get more strategies and tips to help us. And something that's really hard to do sometimes is catching our children being good. And it's really difficult waiting their turn. They may interrupt people. They may fidget. They run out. They often have difficulty playing quietly. So they're always on the go. So how do we catch them being good? So anytime that you see that your child is doing something in the way that you want them to, let them know. Ignore some of those things that are more difficult, and perhaps let them know, catch them at being good and letting them know that they are doing the right stuff. So that helps with that self-esteem piece. There are a lot of sensory diets out there that we may want to try with our child. And they can be very inexpensive. And there's many books on this. And we can look up online and see different diets that just require, and a lot of those are about sensibility and eating right and avoiding certain foods that may have things that tend to make us more hyper. I talked about scheduling that one-on-one time with our child. We want to do that, to really embrace our child and let them know that they're very special to us. And a lot of times spending time reading with them during that time sometimes can be one of those things, depending on the age of our child. And often offer them good choices, acceptable choices, because we have good choices and bad choices, and talk about those things, especially during those times that we have one-on-one time. So if they make a choice that you see is wrong, ask them about, what else can we do next time? What can we do to make this better, to make a better choice? Clear expectations. We need to make sure that we're giving our children clear expectations, and we need to communicate with the school and give our child that positive attention. Communication. You keep hearing me say communication. Communication is so important. We really need to communicate with the doctor. When we have a concern, it's an important piece to talk with the doctor. Patience and understanding. And I know sometimes I look up and I go, please God, Grant me patience right now because I need it now, because sometimes it's so difficult to be patient, so very difficult to be patient. And I understand, but working together collaboratively with the school, with your doctors, and also with the help of other family and friends, getting ideas, all very useful information to help our children be successful with ADHD and ADD. And the next one that we're going to be talking about, we're just talking about communication. So it's very, very important. We're going to be going into effective parent-teacher collaborations. Sometimes when we're talking about our children, and our children are having behavior, especially we were just talking about ADHD and how difficult that can be. We want to know that with effective strategies, working with our teachers, that this part of our presentation may help with that situation with communication, because I know that for me, there were times that hearing about what my child is doing or not doing or what's going on was very difficult to hear. So we want to use strategies that will be very effective. And I know that when we're hoping that this information is going to be very useful to you and help make those difficult moments a little bit easier. So when we're talking about communication and collaboration, those are big words. What does it mean? What does it really mean? So in general, the meaning of the communication and collaboration is working together and with other members while expressing effective ideas. So Dr. Covey is and is an author of several books, including the internationally successful book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says that the development of shared vision is critical to the functioning of any team and ultimately the success of any children and youth. So it's very important. Communication is very important. So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. But even those two parts of communication, they only add up to 40% of communication. And the major focus of good communication is that active listening. Excuse me. It is that people perceive what we are saying because of body language. And if I was to be talking to you and talking like this, then that body language would be, oh, Suzanne's having a bad day. What is up with, she's not really interactive with this. And where I'm trying my best to sit straight and listen. Or actually, I guess I'm talking, so I apologize. But if I were going to be listening, I would be looking directly at them. I would have my hands in an open gesture, not perhaps behind my back, where it would, or with my arms crossed, because listening to someone like that, I may be comfortable standing like that, but it conveys that I'm kind of closed. So that's why that openness with the hands and the body is very, very important to convey and know that we are listening, because so much of this is important in how. So you can see that if I were giving this presentation like this, you would be, you wouldn't feel, or if I was listening to you and I'm going like this, you would really not think that I was engaged. But if I'm engaged, again, I'm sitting and I'm listening. So we need to pay attention. We need to be impartial. Now, this is very important about an active listener. So we need that when people are not actively listening, they draw conclusions. So if I'm sitting like this listening, I may be drawing conclusions about what that other person is actually saying or trying to say. And I may be turning off. I may want to not listening, or I may not agree. It's hard to tell what I'm thinking, right? So it's very important to be an active listener when someone is talking and you're paying attention. And it gives you that better sense of not being misunderstood. So let's talk about more about how do we get started, you know, as parents, how do we get started, right? We're going to have a meeting with the teacher, and it may be difficult, right? Or maybe not, I don't know. But we need to understand what that purpose is. So we're going to make a plan. Let's say we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, okay? We're going to make a plan. So I know I have a meeting with the teacher tomorrow. What is the purpose of that meeting? I need to understand that. It's very important for me to understand. I'm going to have the meeting. What the first part of this is, why am I meeting? So we need to go ahead and prepare for that meeting. We need to know what that meeting is about, right? We want to be prepared before going in there, and we want to be prepared to explain our child's strengths, the needs of area of need, and really and truly, when it comes to that, as a parent, I am the expert. I do know my child best. I do know what their strengths are, and I do know what their weaknesses are. So I can write down this list that I have, right? So depending on your child and their abilities, you know, I could have them anyway. So we're going to list this list, right? We're going to write down what it is that we want the teacher traits. But the other part about that, I know what this meeting is about, and I'm going to make this list. But what is it that I want out of this meeting? I need to think about what I want out of this meeting. So that's how I want to know what I want out of it. I want that outcome. So how do I make this plan work for me to put it together so that I know what it is I'm doing? I need to make that plan work for me. So here we go. We're going to make this plan. So depending on my child's abilities, I'm going to have a conversation with my child, because that is one of the best ways. I don't know how many times that I have made as a parent, I have made a plan, and I have made a plan with the teacher, and my child doesn't agree. And then I find out later. So this is from experience. You know, we can go and have a conversation with our child so that we can see, you know, what our child wants out of class. So we can sit down and actually have a conversation. And we can say to our child, you know, we can go, hey, you know, I'm going to have a meeting with your teacher tomorrow, and I have some ideas of what I want to talk about. But what are things you would like me to talk about with your teacher? What are things that are going on? And then if you have the child like I have, it's like, you know, there's no getting answers from that, right? So then I have to start with things like, what do you like about school? Can you tell me a little bit about what you like about school? What is your favorite subject? Then we can get into conversation. How are you getting along with your classmates? Who sits next to you to the left? Who sits next to you to the right? Can you tell me about them? Do you like them? What are their favorite things? And kind of get a sense of having this conversation and getting your child to open up more and more about what's going on. And then it gives you a sense for what your child wants to talk about. So other things to ask about is that, you know, it's like, what's your favorite class? What do you like about it? What's your least favorite class? What is it that you don't like about that class? And so then when we're talking about that is, what would make that class better for you? My child would say, I don't want to take that subject. I go, well, you have to. So sometimes we have to do things. So what if you could change anything in that classroom, what would it be? Well, helpful for you? What is difficult about that class? So how would you like to be rewarded? If you do a good job in that class, how would you like to be rewarded? So talk about some of these things. There's a lot of things that you can think of because you know your child best. Talk about the things that your child would like you to talk about in this meeting. And that helps drive that communication. So now we have this list of ideas that we had, and we've got to take back from that conversation we just had with our child. And then maybe we tweak that conversation some. What does it need to look like so that we're prepared to have open communication with our child? So the other thing is that so that helps us get into that meeting that we're going to do, right? The other thing is that we need to think about is, how are we communicating with the teacher? What is the best way to communicate with you? You know, what's the best way? How does the teacher want? Are they using a certain system in school? Are they using a folder that you're communicating? What are the best way? And what are the times that work best for you? What are the times that work best for the teacher to communicate? What does that look like? And you can ask questions like, you know, how is your child doing academically? What are they learning? So that this way you can come home and help them also learn with that piece. So the other thing is, when are you getting progress reports? Do you know when you're getting the progress reports? Are you needing them more often? How are they sent home? I had one child that sometimes they didn't come home. So that was very difficult sometimes. So we had to set up that communication piece. But the other thing is, how are you measuring what my child's academic progress is? What does it look like? So understanding and talking about those goals, especially if our child has an IEP or a 504, how, you know, what goals are we setting for our child, and how can we do this at home to help out? So asking the teacher, I know this is going to sound strange, but asking that teacher how we can work together is also very critical, because they may have other ideas of how this works. So when I go into this next piece, we're going to talk a little bit about the teacher. How does the teacher prepare? Teacher prepares very, very similar. And so a teacher, it's not very different at all, because they have to understand that purpose of the meeting. They have a reason for that meeting. And they need to understand what the strengths and weaknesses or areas of need that my child may have. They may have, and they usually, when I go into the meetings, they have a list of the areas of need for my child, but also the strengths, which is good. I always ask to hear about the good stuff first, because we'll go into the need afterwards. I need to hear good stuff about my children, about my child. So it's really a nice piece. So, and the teacher needs to know, because our child may act differently in school. So what are they seeing about personality trait of my child, or how they're getting along with people? And then they need to know also what the result of that meeting has to be. So as we see that, you can see that we both have to plan for this meeting a little bit. It helps if we plan for this meeting, because then we kind of know what to expect and what we're wanting to get out of it, so that we can best support our child. So some other things that you can do in this meeting, which I have found very, very useful, is providing resources. Both teachers and professionals can share resources. And I'm going to give you an example of one resource that I was very tickled, because I was new to the area and I didn't know a lot about stuff that was going on in my community. And I had found out about sensory movies. And the sensory movies, and when they were happening, and there was one coming up, and they had an agenda, you know, they had a whole agenda that said when they were having them for the year, and where they would be, and what the cost was, and who to contact, how to sign up. And I took the flyer in and I gave it to the teacher, and the teacher was like, I didn't know anything. Well, thank you, Suzanne. Mrs. Lane, I really appreciate you sharing this. So he slipped to use my first name, because then it was like, we were getting that communication piece. And so that was really helpful. And then when I was asking, did he know anything else? And he actually provided some other things that the schools were doing for the parents, which was very helpful. And then part of what we can discuss is that progress that our child is doing. And then we talk about how our children are getting along with their classmates, their peers, And with teachers too, finding out who that favorite teacher is. It's very, very important. And in that meeting, I was always asking, what can I do for you? You know, because I want my teacher to be supported, because I know that my child was pretty difficult. So I wanted to make sure that they knew I was supporting them. So I would be taking things home in the elementary years. I was taking things home to cut and paste because I was working during the day. It was very difficult, you know, to be able to come into the classroom and help, but I could do other things. And then I would find times to take days off to go on field trips. And that was always a lot of fun. And the other thing to know about is that we want to know about those accountability plans. Where do I find information? You know, because then maybe I can become more involved. I don't know. These are the things that we really want to know about. So we have at Family Star, we have these top 10 tips that are very important. Okay. And one of those, and this goes both for teachers and parents as well. It's, if we're having a meeting, don't be late. It's really important to be on time. Our time is very valuable. It's very important. You know, we have schedules that we need to attain to. We have therapy sessions that we need to get to. We have, it's very courteous. And that's where we use that communication piece. How do we communicate? Knowing ahead of time. Are we emailing the teacher? Are we calling the school? Are we texting them? So is there a website that we're using? So this shows respect, mutual respect of each other. Another very helpful hint is to be taking notes. I go into a meeting sometimes and there's a lot there, right? There's a lot of information. I'm going to be taking some notes, especially if I have my notes from going into the meeting, things I want to talk about. I let the teacher talk first, tell me what she wants, and then I go down my list, because sometimes I can go check, that was talked about, check, this was talked about. I may elaborate from my notes on what she's talking about or he's talking about, depending on who the teacher is, on suggestions that are going on. But the other part about taking notes is that when she's giving me suggestions that I don't have, I'm writing them down on my note sheet. And sometimes it's hard to keep up when you're going into a meeting like that, especially if we're overwhelmed and we have more than one child and we have all these different meetings. Sometimes going in with a friend who's a little bit more at ease and non-judgmental, that can take good notes, it's very, very helpful to be able to do that. So really important, especially if we're going into a difficult, we know that this might be a difficult conference, we really want to try to start this on a positive note. And I know that sometimes it's very difficult, you know, and we need to make it more than, hi, how are you doing? How was your week? We need it to be a little bit more than just that, and a little bit more personal, so that we're getting this off to a fresh start. It's really a good way to do that. Another thing is that we all have these little things, right? Can't tell you how distracting that can be. And I know that if I'm going into a meeting and I have sick children at home, which happens quite often, right? We have someone at home sick or something else, or someone's watching the kids, or something's going on really, really important. Put it on silent and then put it on the table or wherever you are and say, and I'm so sorry, but I need to do this, but I have a sick child at home. I don't want to miss it, but I'm putting it on silent so that it can just kind of flash at me and I'll know and I'll excuse myself. So kind of let them know you don't want things that are going to distract you. And so that's why having another friend with us sometimes is very helpful for that distraction piece. We can help avoid that. So we did talk about starting off with a positive note, but have an open mind. So when the teacher suggests something that, you know, might not agree with you or you might not like it, that's okay. Be that active listener and listen, and responding with that nod of the head, you know, okay, I got this, and you're writing it down. You want to be engaging. So you want to let them know, if you're not talking, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And as you're writing, you know, it's that active listening. And that's what we were talking about earlier, you know, not the, oh, he did what? No, you know, you want to be, oh, okay, more like, so that you're more engaging, not that closed. We don't want it, because I know that sometimes I just could go, oh, this is not it. So we do want to be more engaging with them, and listening, and be that active listener with them. Really a good piece of that. And something that's very important that I have seen happen time and time again is make sure that not only the teacher has your contact information, but that it's updated. In our mobile world that we live in, and I mean mobile not by this mobile, but moving around or changing homes, we need to make sure that they have the most current information about where we live. Our phone number has changed, where that's at, because the last thing we want is someone trying to reach us and they cannot reach us. Very, very critical. Very important, because this is for our children. Another thing is that it's really important. And I know that sometimes different cultures, different people, different personalities, we want to just listen. For those folks, we need to kind of break out of that shell and have a list of questions that we want to ask. And if they're not answered as we're listening, as we're doing this active listening, then what we want to do is ask these questions. I can't stress this enough. We really do want to be asking these questions. If we're in doubt or don't understand, it's very important. But how do we do that, right? So they just said something I don't understand. She says, Johnny is going to be coming in on the school bus and going left to the classroom, and I'll meet him at the door. Let's use that for an example. And I'm looking at that. What you meant really was you're going right, not left, right? Well, that's not that active listening, because what's happened is that you restated it in a different way. You don't want to say that. You may want to say something. So you're saying that he's going to go to the right, because I'm confused about which direction. So you're letting them know and giving them an opportunity to rephrase that, so that you have a clear understanding of where it is your child is going to go when they get off the bus and get to school. This way, you really do get a clear understanding. You're not, and you're understanding. And the other piece about that is that really and truly, there is no stupid question. Okay, it's very important to understand that. Any question that you have, it's not off limits. This is about your child. It's about your child's education. You have the right to have this clear and understand. So you can ask questions about your child. Another really important piece is being objective. Being objective and open-minded about problems that's affecting your child's learning. Sometimes options or suggestions are really difficult. And I know that I can say that because sometimes it's been very difficult. But we have to have that really, truly, that healthy balance to being honest with ourselves, and I always say, my child's difficult, and respect the fact that for my teachers, that their thoughts are important, and that even if I don't agree with them, I know that they're having the best interest for my child, and I can write that down and try to be open-minded about it, and then maybe go back and with my notes and kind of look at those notes, and then when I've had time to think about what was said, because sometimes it can be very difficult, it's a very helpful tool for me. And we talked about earlier, sharing support and resource information. Teachers have a great list of resources for parents, and this will assist us with that homework piece and studies, because they have websites and learning tools. and they're using evidence-based strategies and websites that have been vetted and looked at to get that information. And when we're having difficulty helping our children at home with homework, then we can ask, where can I get help, support at home for this? What websites would you suggest? And so that's helping us help support our child at home. So developing an action plan when we're leaving a meeting can be key. So we took these great notes, information, and we want to make a plan out of that, because I know that if I look at this, she's saying I've got to read for 20 minutes every night with my child, and my child struggles with reading. How can I do this strategy, right? So I need to develop a timeline off of that. So I'm making my action plan, looking at my calendar, sitting down. This is the time that I'm going to sit down with my child and we're going to work on this. So this way, the next time we have another meeting, we'll see where our success is. And I can actually, I've always kept everything in a binder. I started doing this because I found that my kitchen table got very crowded fast and I would lose things. So I started, after I had a meeting, I would hole punch everything and put it right on top, the very top from the last meeting. So then the next time I went in, I had this little folder and we could do the things that worked and didn't work. And that helped me make my plan prior to having that meeting. It's a great way of having that information. And I did mention that when we're doing this, when we're making this plan of action, that we do need to follow up. I put it onto my calendar. I put my plan. Okay, so I did this, right? I'm mom. I did it. I got this. Okay, so I go home and I have 3 children in the house, and I have a husband, and my parents live across the street. So I need to share this plan with everyone, because this way that helps me support my child, but it helps the whole family support my child or help support the children, and that we put this together. So that's a great way to follow up, is putting this all together. And then if something's not working, let's say that we made a plan with the teacher during this meeting and it's not working, we need to let the teacher know, I'm trying this, but I'm not being very successful. Then you can go back and talk about strategies and tips to make this successful, or maybe we need to go to plan B, So, and we can set up a time for another meeting. This is very important. So we're following through. Always follow through. It's because a good plan is a good plan, but if it's not followed through, it's just something on a piece of paper. So we want to make sure that we have this put together as a plan. It's really a critical piece. Now, we talked a lot about communication, and I do want to talk about collaborative communication, because collaborative communication is a big piece of everything we do. Whether we are at the doctor's office talking to the doctor, we want to make sure that we're being effective. So I want to make sure, and earlier I talked about Stephen Covey. We first really want to be, he's that author of several really good books, and he's an international author. And one of those is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He did a quote in one of his books. And in that quote, it says, first seek to understand, and then to be understood. So really, what does that mean? So according to him, it's about how you say it. There are 2 pieces of communication, and the parts of communication we talked about early in an earlier workshop was that communication is not just what we say, but it is our body language as well. So only 40% adds up to what we say and how we say it. So we have body language, which you'll be surprised to hear is 60% of what we communicate. Remember, I was talking about this, and if I was off, you're talking to me going this way, and I'm looking over here, then you would say, well, that's not engaging, right? So 60% is our body language. That's really, really difficult. So every action, even the silence, is a communication. So if you're talking to me and I'm not answering you, that's not a good communication. That silence is a way of saying that I'm opposing what you're saying or I don't understand. But the other person is not understanding that piece. So we are taught all our lives that communication is 50-50. First you talk, then I talk, then you talk, and then it's my turn. And when you're talking, I'm thinking of what to say next. And while I'm talking, you're thinking of what to say next. Thinking, not listening. Communication is not just talking. Communication is really paying attention to what the other person is saying. That kind of focusing on conversation, that's what we call active listening. And so we need to be, the elements of active listening are being attentive, being non-judgmental, or paraphrasing. But don't overdo that. Don't want to overdo that one. And being aware of body language. So with these elements, it is really important that people are not actively listening when they jump to conclusions. So if you jump to a conclusion, you're not actively listening to what the other person really means, or maybe you're becoming judgmental because you don't agree with what the other person is saying, and then you find yourself shutting down, or you're just trying to listen, but you're really not understanding. So one way to make sure that you understood what that other person means is that it's to repeat back to them and use their own words. Now, on a previous portion of the workshop, we talked about that a little bit. So we're using their own words. So if I gave you instructions to go sit down and start your homework, I understand that you said for me to go sit down and do my homework. Is this correct? And then the other person has that opportunity to either correct what they said, or, oh, what I meant was I want you to go into the other room and start on your science homework. A little more clarity. It gives that other person that opportunity to rephrase what they said if they thought you were not understanding. So be aware when you do that it's not just their body language, it's your body language. Did you mean, that, it's a body language. We need to be able to be aware of what they may perceive what we're saying, and then pay attention to the facial expressions. Make eye contact. And we understand, and in certain cultures, it can be considered to be rude to make eye contact. So see what the other person's style is, actively listening. So we also have another way of listening, which is called the opposite of active listening, is that passive listening. So when you're looking at what are you saying? My inner voice, really drowned you out. It's that can be very difficult, right? What does that look like? And what if I'm sitting down reading the newspaper and you're telling me, things such as, and I know some of you may have seen some of these caricatures. You just can't stop saying, I stopped talking to you an hour ago, so it's kind of funny, it's like, what do we, how are we communicating? Or, sometimes you can feel like someone's not listening to you because they're not even there. You know, you're talking to a newspaper or a wall. What does that look like? How do you feel? And then sometimes you can really feel like you're really alone, you know, on an island all by yourselves. And it's like, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? You know, it just makes you wonder, you know, are we listening to each other? So we have these opinions and perspectives, just like saying, you know, that two heads are better than one. There's, you know, multiple perspectives in helping, you know, do that problem solving and brainstorming options. It really goes back to that respect piece and general curiosity, not just in legal rights, but the right to speak without interruption, the right to disagree, and the right to, you know, to be asking questions. Collaborative communication really values that. And it really encourages, you know, both parties to be expressive and using honest feelings, promote mutual respect, allowing both, you know, to discuss and have a discussion, even with a disagreement. And we also, in that sense, we need to be also looking at cultural differences and respecting that, understanding those cultural differences, and remain focused on the topic at hand. So not starting with one topic and going to another topic, but keeping that communication going. So when people are not giving that open and honest input, other people really feel left to draw their own conclusions, and that may be far from the truth and can result in really, you know, unnecessary conflict. So we can be saying the same things, but we really need to be very clear. So when, you know, individuals feel that respect and valued, decisions and even disagreements become possible without leaving those unresolved conflicts. When parents and educators communicate effectively, they can really develop a partnership that is focused on what is best for the child. So as parents and educators, our goal, it's truly the same. And I always, when I'm going into a difficult situation, it's one of these things that's in the back of my mind, is that we are here to help children have successful outcomes. And the best outcomes occur when parents and children, educators, can truly be partners in achieving that goal. We want to talk a little bit about what are some of those barriers to communication. We all have barriers to communication sometimes. We have negative history. You know, we may have had a bad situation with somebody and we're in a bad place with this. We may be having some, you know, health issues. You know, a person may not be feeling well or may be affected with their communication because of that. Emotional responses. Often we're trying to identify what the child needs. There's a decision about what the child cannot do. Hearing these negative things as a parent, and I've been there, these are difficult, you know, very, very difficult. And what's even more difficult for me sometimes is that they've got these acronyms and this jargon. They're talking about things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing at home, and I'm not understanding them. So we need to realize that it's full of jargons that we may not understand. And so, or may become, they're very unfamiliar. And it's very common as parents, we're overwhelmed by the sheer number of professionals sitting at the table with us. We're a team, but wait a minute, I don't agree. There's so many of you. Why is this? I'm overwhelmed. So how do we, these can be barriers. So what do we do? What are some steps that we can do when we're facing situations like this? When there's a disagreement, there are some steps we're going to talk about. And we, at F&D, we call it luck. And I don't know if any of you have heard this acronym before, but it's called luck, and it's called listen to and carefully listen carefully to what the person is saying, repeat back to them in your own words what you think they are saying, but be certain to be understood. It's okay to disagree with the other person, but remember to use a respectful tone. Remember, communication, that's at 40%, so we have that oral. We need to use a respectful tone. Sometimes what that other person says will change your mind about an issue. And it's all right to compromise or to change your opinion if that's necessary. But know and state the reasons for your opinions. And that's what we call luck. L stands for listen to and restate the other person's opinion. Use a respectful tone. C, compromise or change your opinion if necessary. K, know the reason for your opinion and state the reason for your opinion. Collaborative communication can be very useful when working with coworkers. Access and resources such as VR, vocational rehabilitation, or work incentive programs, inquiring about resources, and as mom working with my children, working with my spouse, this collaborative communication can be used in so many aspects of our lives. And it takes about 21 days to really change the way that we do things and to get into a habit for something. So how can we apply this? And how does, it apply to us? How do we use it in the real world? One example would be, Micah's boss is planning an important lunch meeting this Saturday. Micah has known about the meeting for a month, but just realized the lunch is on the same day as his sister's birthday. What can Micah do? So if we're using the luck piece, if we're using luck and we're looking at how this defines, we would be looking at, we may have a negative history, or we're looking at the health component piece of this. The emotional responses are very important on this piece, right? Those would be some of the barriers that we would have because, hey, it's my sister's birthday. What do I do? So how do I do this? And how do I ask those questions? So what can Micah do? He can talk to his boss about this, or can he talk to his sister? So there's several. There's not a wrong answer to that, but we need to look at that piece and see what is it that would work best for us. And so he could do something like, he could say to his boss something like, I'm so honored that my work is important to our new clients. You really need me. Do you really need me on Saturday? I'll be there. You had a great idea to celebrate. I've had a great idea after talking with them, is to celebrate. Can I celebrate, with her after lunch? And then I can say, hey, thank you. Micah can say, hey, thank you for working with me and coming up with this different idea of what I can do, to help my sister and to be able to work. It's really important that coming together is a beginning. Working together is really a common goal, and it's progress. And good collaboration and communication can make things a success. Very important things that we need to look at when we're looking at that. How do we communicate and collaborate? So this is going to end our YouTube presentation. I hope that this was good information for you. And that you enjoyed our presentation from Family Star. If you're wanting more information about us, I would really encourage you to go look at our website, www.fndusa.org. and click on the Family Star component piece of that. And it's been very nice talking with everybody. And my email address, if you have any questions or concerns, you can email me at Suzanne, SUZANNE, at fndfl.org. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.